talk to us just about the financial impact. To what degree, how big of a risk are these developments to a stock like United and Alaska Airlines?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on. I think when one looks at the earnings impact or the potential impact, one thing we don't know right now is when will the planes be back in the air. But when one thinks about these delays, you take capacity out of the system, there's a revenue loss from that. And yes, they don't have to pay for fuel, but roughly speaking, a 1% cut in available seat miles could result in a 2 to 2.5% reduction in pre-tax earnings, just sort of back of the envelope. And there's some wiggle around that in terms of where fuel prices are at the moment that you have to cut the capacity. So certainly on a short-term basis, it can be a big deal. I think of all the news that we've seen so far, I'm a little bit more constructive in terms of the findings. Maybe the investigation's not over, but worst case scenario in this Boeing issue doesn't seem to be materializing at this point.
When passengers feel like there is a present issue that is either known or unknown, they feel a little bit more propensity to say, okay, what kind of aircraft am I flying on? Do I have the opportunity, as was the case after the MAX issues before, back in 2018, 2019, where many of these airlines had to think about where they were going to allow for customers to change the aircraft that they were flying on. What type of pricing power do the airlines lose in that instance as well here?
Yeah, I think probably it's still somewhat early to gauge the customer reaction. Absolutely, passenger comfort is a very big deal. From what kind of aircraft are they flying on to people getting nervous about turbulence. And as long as you're in a seatbelt, turbulence is not really a dangerous thing, but it's uncomfortable for many people. So absolutely, this is something to watch for the group. If we do get into a situation where these problems are prolonged or there turns out to be another issue with the MAX 9. I think from Friday's incident, from everything we've seen, this was an extremely fortunate occurrence that it did not occur at cruising altitude when the air pressure differential is massively bigger. And when people are moving up and down the cabin, that would have been an entirely different story. So everything I can see, the flight crew did a marvelous job putting the plane into an emergency dive, getting back down to a safer altitude. Is that going to make a dent in people getting on the MAX 9? I think it's a wait and see. But as I mentioned, this seems to be, at this juncture, a manufacturing issue and not a design flaw.
Steve, how do airlines, though, think about future orders, right? Just in terms of the competition out there between Boeing and Airbus, the fact that maybe United would think twice before making some of those future purchases down the line. Walk us through that type of thinking and some of the trends that maybe you are looking out for in terms of the impact that could then have on these stocks.
Yeah, so if one looks at the big airlines especially, they all have skin in the game with one or both major manufacturers. So you really don't have a great many options when one thinks about acquiring larger gauge planes. I think down the road, one of the things that it could be interesting to look at is to what extent do the airlines start to opt to lease instead of buy. So if you do see a trend towards leasing, for example, it could mean A, the OEMs continue to have a lot of production issues, or B, there is some reticence on the airline's part to take on the asset risk of some of these new planes. So we haven't really seen that so far, and fortunately, at least at this juncture, the loose bolts is somebody didn't put the door plug on properly, not like some kind of major flaw in the MAX 9's fluid dynamics.
Do you think that this changes, though, and kind of piggybacking off of what Shauna just asked, on the plane order, the large plane order market share, do you think that this changes the calculus for companies who already have an existing contract for deliveries to actually exercise the option for further aircrafts to be delivered in the future?
Yeah, so I think, it's a bit hard to kind of paint the broad group with one brushstroke because some of the carriers are in very different places than others in terms of aircraft availability, what kind of equipment they fly, and the availability of pilots. So when we think about what could make some difference in throughput. Pilot availability and aircraft availability are kind of the two big things. So one of the things that we would note, for instance, the network majors, I would say, are having an easier time in terms of procuring pilots than, let's say, the regional airlines. So will this instance lead them to exercise options now on the MAX 9? I think it's hard to say. Because you've seen a lot of delays in equipment over the last couple of years, and it doesn't seem like that's going to ease anytime soon. But certainly, if we have one or two airlines somewhere that don't want to accelerate their deliveries, it might create room in the skyline for somebody else to accelerate.
Steve Trent, Citi airline analyst, thanks so much for helping us break all of this down. Our own Alexis Keenan saying a moment ago, updated manuals might be yet to come. We'll see what that looks like too. Steve, appreciate the time.
Pleasure.
Thanks.